Tonight, a rare night in cable news. Reverend Billy Graham and President Bush 43. Earlier today, we went to North Carolina and spoke to Reverend Graham shortly before he had lunch with President Bush. Dr. Graham, it's very nice to see you, and I appreciate you sitting down and doing this interview with us.
Thank you. It's a privilege. I've looked forward to it, doing this sometime.
Well, I've been looking forward to it as well.
Thank you. This is the first interview I've given in several years to anybody. So I count this a privilege to be with you.
Well, I'm flattered and grateful to have the chance.
Thank you.
So, how did you meet the Bush family?
The Bush family? I would have to think that through a little bit, but I think it was through his grandfather. I met them in Florida. I played golf with him, and then his grandmother invited me to her home, invited about a dozen neighbors for me to answer biblical questions or to pray with them and to teach them. And that began a long friendship with her. She was one of the sweetest women I think I ever met, a very deep Christian, and she became a wonderful friend to me, and through her, I began to meet the rest of the family.
So you know President Bush 41 and President Bush 43, both of them.
Right, but 41 I've known he became one of my best friends, and we became very close friends, and I was with him on very special occasions, and spent several times at the White House with him. He and Barbara became very close friends to Ruth and me.
And of course, then you met President Bush 43, the younger President Bush, President
George W. Bush.
George W.
Oh, yes. I remember him as well, I thought he was a teenager, but we were in Kennebunkport in Maine, where they invited me many summers to take a vacation with them, the family. And he was a member of the family. And I remember George Sr. asked me if I would conduct a Bible study in their home there on several occasions. On this occasion, I remember a young fellow back there that stood up and asked some questions. Happened to be George W. Bush. And we became friends, and we had talks together, and we walked together, and we played tennis together and golfed together.
In his new book, he talks about you and essentially says you helped change his life.
Well, that's up to him. I wouldn't know that, except I know that he was very interested in spiritual things, and he asked a lot of very deep questions about the Bible and about Christian faith, and I tried to answer as best I could, and very grateful that the Lord worked, I think, with him during this time.
In 2001, after the 9/11, you came to the National Cathedral when President Bush was the current president.
Right, he asked me to come and speak on that occasion, which I did, and I was honored to be asked, but I was very sorrowful about what had happened, and so it was a mixed emotion for me to stand up and speak at that cathedral on that occasion.
At age 92, and I was fortunate to go to your 90th birthday, but at age 92, do you have hope for the world, for the nation? What kind of hope is it?
I have a tremendous amount of hope because I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, who was raised from the dead. And I believe he's alive right now. My wife is already in heaven. I look forward to seeing her definitely in the near future because I'm 92 now, and I know that my time is limited on this earth, but I have tremendous hope in the fact I'll be in the future life, and I'll be there because of what Jesus Christ did for me on the cross and by the resurrection. And this gives me a great deal of hope.
You mentioned Jesus Christ, so we should talk Christmas. What does Christmas mean to you?
Christmas means a great deal to me. I was reared in a family that celebrated Christmas to some extent, but I married into a family that celebrated Christmas in a big way. And my wife always made a big thing of Christmas. For the children, we have 5 children, and we had a terrific time at Christmas, and we all looked forward to it. We would get up on Christmas morning and have our prayers, and then we would sit under the tree and open our presents, usually on Christmas morning, sometimes on Christmas Eve. But when I looked into the crib or the manger and saw that little baby who was going to rise to become the greatest teacher that ever lived, to die on the cross for my sins, to know that I'd be forgiven because of what he was doing, it absolutely transformed Christmas for me into all the shopping and the gifts and all the things we celebrate at Christmas. It's a spiritual time. It's a time that strengthens my faith and gives me courage for the future. And I don't expect to live very much longer, but I do remember that every Christmas strengthened my faith as I came along.
We have more with Reverend Graham in 2 minutes. If he could go back in time, is there anything he would do differently? His answer might surprise you. More with Reverend Billy Graham is next. And then President Bush 43 goes on the record. He gives you the inside story about the day he met Reverend Graham and his life was changed. President Bush is minutes away. Continuing with Reverend Billy Graham. If you were to do things over again, would you do it differently?
Yes. I would study more. I would pray more, travel less, take less speaking engagements. I took too many of them in too many places around the world. If I had to do over again, I'd spend more time in meditation and prayer and just telling the Lord how much I love him and adore him. And I'm looking forward to the time we're going to spend together for eternity.
Why would you speak less when you had such an enormous audience and people listening? Why would you want to speak less?
I didn't mean that I would speak less in these great stadiums. I meant that I would speak less at all kinds of conferences and things that I was invited to throughout the world, especially in Great Britain and the United States, because I'd get up and travel to those places, and I didn't have time to think and study and pray, and I needed time for that. And if I had to do over again, I would try to organize it much better.
At what age did you realize that you wanted to be a preacher?
I guess I was about 18 or 19. I was in Florida as a student in a small Bible school near Tampa. And it used to be a country club where we had the school. And I used to walk the streets in this area that had completely disintegrated because of the Depression of that time. And I would pray and I would ask God for a direction for my life and for the genuine purpose of my life. What am I here for? And one night, I was out on the 18th green, lying there beside the green in the moonlight and the palm trees. And the Lord seemed to call me and say that I was to preach the gospel. And from that time on, I began to prepare. By preparation, I mean I began to read books that would contribute to what I would say in the years to come. And then I began to realize that my job was try to win other people to Christ, which I did privately and publicly, which became eventually my sermons that we call evangelism.
Well, it's extraordinary the impact you had, drawing thousands and thousands of people. Does that surprise you?
Absolutely. I never really thought of it during that period of time, but it surprised me, yes.
Actually, it's millions. It's not thousands, it's millions.
Pardon?
It's millions of people.
Yes. I spoke to 1 million in one service in Korea and Seoul, and that was the largest audience I ever had.
What was that like?
Well, it didn't not like any other. They were just spread out as far as you could see in a great plaza along the river. And we had the leadership of the country was there, and American representatives that were there. And I preached to them, and many people responded. I got in a helicopter, and they flew me around so I could see the crowd from a different angle. Then they flew me to the airport, and I flew directly to San Francisco.
If you have any advice for young preachers today, what's the advice?
Spend more time in study and prayer. That's the secret of successful evangelism. If you neglect that, you've neglected the very heart of God's call to you. Now, there are wonderful schools to go to. We have wonderful Bible schools, Bible colleges, liberal arts colleges that are dedicated to Christianity and to the spread of Christianity. I went to one called Wheaton near Chicago, and that's where I met my wife. And it was a tremendous experience to be at that small Christian college with high academics. In fact, their academics today would rival that of the schools in the Northeast. And I've been very thankful to the Lord that He sent me to that school.
Well, I'm going to let you go. I know you're having lunch with President Bush, and I'd certainly appreciate you sitting down and talking to me today,
Well,
Dr. Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.